Live from the SABC's Auckland Park headquarters, welcome to the midweek edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo, and on the show tonight... While Amatola District Municipality Municipal Manager is preoccupied with the alleged authorizing, of the dragging of a councillor at their municipal building, he is reportedly earning much more than he should for a municipality of his size. And while he is supposed to run the organization itself, the municipality that is in shambles. It's broke and is unable to meet its obligation. His political principles appear to be just as rogue, rejecting efforts to stabilize and then turn around the municipality. We speak to Parliament's Watchdog Committee on Local Government. And after that, we widen the conversation as we ask, how can watchdog bodies avoid being made toothless bulldogs? A relevant conversation on the back of the decision of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, SCOPA, to request President Cyril Ramaphosa to make written representations regarding a complaint against him. This after ANC MP Mervyn Dirks asked SCOPA to probe the president following his alleged admission on a leaked ANC NEC video that he was aware of party members who used state resources for party political purposes. But we kick off the program with an interview with Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi about plans to strengthen South Africa's asylum and refugee system. All that and more coming up in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. Following a cabinet instruction to overhaul the management of the asylum system in South Africa, Home Affairs Minister Aaron Motsoaledi met with representatives of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees yesterday. Dr. Motsoaledi joins us on the line to give us detail and highlight the importance of that particular meeting. Good evening, Dr. Motsoaledi. Thanks very much for your time this evening. Give us a bit of background, perhaps, before you give us the background to the meeting itself. Give us the background to that instruction that you were given by a cabinet to forge ahead with this particular project.
Good evening, Vuyo. Good evening to the listeners and viewers out there. Well, we have agreed with the United Nations in March 2020 that we'll have this meeting. This meeting has got a long history, whereby in 2015 with agreement of cabinet, a team of people were sent to Geneva to talk to the United Nations about the weight of refugees on the country in terms of services and in terms of the fiscus. And after those discussions, it was agreed that we'll meet again to take the discussions forward. And so this meeting that was part of that. It will have taken place in March earlier, but because of COVID, it couldn't, and it took place yesterday.
Were we the only country, Minister, in that situation? In other words, were we singled out, or were we part of conversations that the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, several countries that they were talking to about the same or similar matters?
Well, the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees has got a mandate to deal with refugees all over the world. But we went there on our own as South Africa. We don't know whether any other country approached them. Time and again, we do approach United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees because it's the agency under United Nations that has authorized or empowered to deal with refugee and asylum seeker matters. So we went there as a country. As to whether any other country went or how they are dealing with other countries, that really we don't know.
Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at the time that it has taken for this meeting to take place? Are we to assume that it was just COVID, or were there other things that needed to happen before you could actually meet?
Well, Vio, this is an international body. It deals with the whole world. So you have got to wait for your turn. And as I said, we're disturbed more by COVID than anything else. And that's why the meeting takes place only yesterday.
Let's go then through some of the items that were on the agenda. Technical support to the country to enable or to help asylum seekers and refugees. What exactly does that entail?
Well, Vio, all in all, there are 7 outcomes which we agreed with United Nations, which we are going to sign for very soon. But we agreed on those 7 outcomes yesterday. I regard 4 of them as extremely important. Not that the other are not, but the 4 are extremely important. The one you are talking about is to help us with the 4 that I think are very important, which I believe should interest you, is the issue of the backlog project, the issue of legislative reform, the issue of durable solutions to these refugee problems, and the issue of statelessness, which you know has stirred some controversies inside the country because it's being misunderstood or being deliberately distorted in order to be misused.
Oh, for some reason, I thought or I assumed, my mistake, that all this, I mean, the technical stuff kind of underpinned most, if not all, of the things that you were going to do. Let's start then talk about the backlog itself. How big is the backlog, and how much time do you think, Minister, it'll take to actually deal with it?
You may remember, Vuyo, that we launched a project with United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees last year in March, under which project the United Nations contributed 143 million rand, whereby we had to hire 36 extra lawyers to help with the backlog project, deal with the backlog for the next 4 years. That means it's a 4-year project. And the reason that it happened was because we built the backlogs from 2008 on asylum seeker status, especially because of what was happening in Zimbabwe. Most of the people who create the backlog was because of the situation in Zimbabwe. So because we're not able to deal with the backlog using a normal everyday mechanism, that's why we launched this project. And the 36 lawyers have been hired, they've been workshopped, they've been meetings with them, they've been trained, they've just started the work. Then the United Nations was happy about that progress. Then yesterday we decided to expand the backlog to include initial refugee status determination. What this means was that the backlog was dealing with those who were appealing. That means people who have already applied for asylum and they were rejected. And there are many, Vuyo, by the way, that's another thing that built the backlog. There are many who have been rejected because, as you know, the situation mostly in Zimbabwe is about economic migration, whereas the issue of asylum have to do with the United Nations Convention of 1951, which clearly states that you deserve asylum status if, 1, there is a natural disaster in your country, like fire, floods, volcanoes, earthquakes. 2, if there is war, or 3, if you are being persecuted under 4 issues, or under political, maybe you are being persecuted because of your political beliefs and practices, or your traditional beliefs and practices, or your religious beliefs, or your sexual orientation. Now, many people come here and say, look, I'm an asylum seeker. When you check them against those criteria of United Nations, they don't cut it because they are basically economic migrants. So that's why the backlog grew, because most people were rejected and they appealed. So the United Nations was helping us with the appeal process, but then they said, if we deal only with the appeal process, there's a high chance that those who are applying for initial refugee determination status will also build up a backlog. And so it's better that we deal with both of them. And that's what was agreed on yesterday.
Off the top of your head, Minister, are you able, would you have the numbers, in other words, and tell us, how many asylum seekers are we talking about in total, and what percentage of those come from Zimbabwe?
At the moment, those who are on the backlog project of appeals is 153,000. But the total asylum seeker population in South Africa, that means people who arrived at one of the 5 refugee reception centers and announced themselves as asylum seekers and were issued with a Section 22 permit. That means a permit under Section 22 of the Immigration Act, which gives them permission to stay in South Africa for 3 months to 6 months while they are applying. That number is something in the vicinity of 950,000 people.
And talking now about what you've agreed on with UNHCR, you are both happy that in the 4 years you've mentioned, you will indeed be able to deal with the backlog, and from there on, the situation will be manageable.
Well, that's the plan, Zio. That's the plan. If somewhere in the middle of that program we realize that it's not going to work, we will obviously devise other means. Perhaps for instance, if we realize that the 36 lawyers are far from being enough, we will definitely go back to United Nations, we'll discuss with them, and we'll see how to rescue the project. But up to now, we have got no reason to believe that the plan won't work.
Statelessness, how big is this particular problem?
Well, Vio, it depends where you're standing. But we raised this issue with the United Nations with the following background. You may be aware that last year, a large contingent of NGOs with some human rights organizations together marched to Home Affairs, demanding that Home Affairs Department must issue birth certificates, subsequently meaning citizenship, to children of non-South African, who were born of foreign nationals, that means non-South African parents, because they were claiming that if we don't issue those birth certificates, then we are increasing statelessness. Now, we had argued even last year that that is not so, and we wanted to check with United Nations. And the outcome of our meeting, let me read it verbatim. The United Nations agrees that South Africa is not obliged to grant citizenship to every child born in South African territory to non-South African parents, unless there is an indication that it will lead to statelessness in line with the 1961 Convention of the Reduction of Statelessness. Quite a number of people claim statelessness simply because they no longer want their countries. They found themselves in South Africa, and they say in order to get South African citizenship, they can just claim statelessness, even though the records are there and we know where they come from. To give you an example, you might be aware that after we decided, with the backing of the cabinet, of course, on the issue of the Zimbabwean permits, where we are no longer renewing them, but we give them an extension for 1 year. There are documents in the court says for the past decade, since they were giving Zimbabwean permits, they know no other country except South Africa, and so they are demanding permanent residence documents, which will lead to citizenship. Now, it's not true that the people who are on the Zimbabwean permit know no other country. We've got their files here. When they were given that Zimbabwe exemption permit, files were opened for them. One of the conditions was they must bring a police clearance from Zimbabwe, and we know they go home almost every year in December. how come then they claim that they know no other country? It means they are going to very soon claim statelessness if they don't get South African papers. And we believe that is an abuse of process.
And does the UNHCR agree with you on that one?
Of course, that's what I've just read. They agree with us, and they said as long as a child who is born here is given a record of birth, which then they must take to their country or the embassy of their country, which must give them a document of that particular country. And that we've been doing even before agreeing with United Nations. We're issuing a record of birth, and people were rejecting it, saying they want the birth certificate. A record of birth shows the name of the child, the parents, where they come from, in which hospital was the child born, on what date, at what time. And they must take that to the embassy and say, here I am, I gave birth to a child in South Africa, but I belong to a country, please give me documents. They've been rejecting that, and the United Nations said no. They agree with us that the line we're following is the correct one.
And on social assistance, which is another matter you discussed, I mean, as everyone has been saying throughout, the resources at the government's disposal are not limitless. You have to offer services to asylum seekers and broadly the refugee community. What did you arrive at with the UNHCR on social assistance?
Two things, if I may read them, because there are just a few lines. The first one is that United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee will appoint a consultant to bring social assistance issues to the forefront and commit to design a social assistance model for indigent asylum seekers. And then the second one is that the consultant will work with a team to bring all the relevant stakeholders together in a whole government approach. Those are the agreements we made on the social assistance.
Mm-hmm. Are there any sort of principles that may not have been written in black and white, that may not have been part of the document of containing the agreements between you and UNHCR, that perhaps underpin the understanding of how that process will unfold once that consultant is appointed?
Well, as I'm saying, we're waiting for them to appoint a consultant who will come up with a model, who will consult all government departments, because this is a whole government affair when it comes to social assistance. It's not only a Home Affairs issue, for the simple reason that when a person comes into South Africa, either as a refugee or asylum seeker, they are not necessarily provided everything by Home Affairs, like shelter, like food, like accommodation, like education, like health. They get those from other departments. And that's why United Nations wants a consultant who will liaise with all other government departments to come with a model which will then be presented to United Nations High Commission and the Republic of South Africa and then agreed upon.
Now, in the document containing the agenda, there is mention of a global compact, but there's also mention of a global refugee forum. Is there one global refugee forum that is going to sort of help you navigate through these issues, or are we talking about various fora who, when they come together, then constitute one forum that you have to speak to or consult with whenever issues arise?
In 2019, there was a global refugee forum which was called in Geneva of all countries, where each country made a pledge on what they are going to do in their country about refugees and asylum seekers. It was a pledge which was made by countries one by one in this global forum. Now, the reason that it appears on this agenda was that because South Africa was part of that, let those pledges that were made by South Africa be incorporated in this program, this particular program which we discussed yesterday, so that we don't find them as separate entities, but we found them as a continuum of one another. That's why the issue of global forum is mentioned. And it was agreed that that global forum will meet every 5 years to look at the progress for the whole world.
Of course, lastly, Minister, we're having this conversation a few days after we saw political parties and individuals going around checking restaurants, making statements that some of us deem to be xenophobic. Just your thoughts and comments on that.
Well, my thinking, Vuyo, is that the whole framework of asylum seekers and refugees and even illegal immigrants are governed by laws in the country. And if we have to solve them, we've got to follow the laws to the letter, because if we start following any other methods, we will slip. We'll be following a slippery road. For instance, one of the agreements we made with United Nations was that we are going to review, and we've already started, by the way. We just wanted a buy-in from United Nations. We're going to review the Citizenship Act of 1995, the Refugee Act of 1998, and the Immigration Act of 2002. We are going to review them to bring them in line with realities of our moment. But secondly, we are going to review them in terms of international trends, whereby it was found that it's easier to deal with this problem if the Citizenship Act, the Refugee Act, and the Immigrant Act are one law with different chapters, rather than different laws which are under different branches. So we deal with the law. For instance, on the issue of repatriation, if I read what we agreed under durable solution, it said the United Nations will organize a tripartite process with a view to operationalize and expedite the process of voluntary repatriation. This will also ensure that countries of origin take responsibility for their nationals. United Nations and the government of South Africa will work closely to sensitize governments of countries of origin through their embassies on the issue of voluntary repatriation. What it means is that when people have to be repatriated, you don't just gather in a group and say we are sending people home. There are rules, and under United Nations, that repatriation is done by United Nations. It is voluntary, together with the International Office on Migration. If it is for illegal immigrants, United Nations doesn't come in. It's us as a country, and the laws are there. We send them to court. The magistrate agree with us. We send them to Lindela. And that's why every year we used to deport about 20,000 people. All of them have gone through the legal process, and they are sent to Lindela, and we call the ambassador of that country. We discuss with them, and we sign documents. This is how it's done, and we'll prefer that way because it is orderly, because a disorderly country cannot survive.
Okay, and of course, not forgetting having to deal with the issue of porous borders.
Yes, and to deal with cross borders, we also have to follow the law. That's why Parliament passed an act to establish a border management authority. True, we consider that too long. It took 10 years for Parliament to finalize that act. But be that as it may, it has been passed. And in November last year, we appointed the commissioner, the first ever commissioner of borders, who, as you know, will be the second commissioner in terms of law enforcement in the country. Because the commissioner we know about is the commissioner of police. We now have a commissioner of borders who has got the same status and is at the same level with commissioner of police, except that his job or her job are only the borders. At the moment, there are with two commissioners. I was just reading a report about the organizational structure, whereby we'll have to go on and finalize and hire more people, and whereby they are in discussion in South African Defence Force to finalize the issue of border guards. That means people who are not the police, but are not the army. Their job is just to guard the borders, but they are going to be uniformed, a different type of uniform with an emblem of border guards, which we are busy discussing with the Department of Trade and Industry and the Herald. So there is a lot of progress on the issue of border guards and border management authority.
And that's where we're going to leave it. Minister, thank you very much for your time. Took my liberties there and took a lot more time than we had agreed on. Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, there following a meeting he had with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, all, of course, having to do with plans, South African plans to strengthen the asylum and refugee system in the country. After the break, beyond what South Africans are fuming over, the dragging of Amatole District Municipality Councillor Nanziwe Khulashe by security guards, we look at how the municipality has been in shambles for a while now, and the man who allegedly authorized her indignity and humiliation has been drawing a fat salary, it is being reported, while seemingly doing nothing to turn the municipality's fortunes around. Welcome back. This is the Watchdog. Amatole District Municipality Mayor Khanyile Maneli has broken his silence over the video clips that are doing the rounds of a councillor who was dragged out of her office by security guards, allegedly at the instruction of municipal manager Thandekile Mnyimba. He posted a statement on the municipality's website, but don't hold your breath though.
Njengo-executive mayor waseMathole ndima nokuxolisa okanye nokucacisa kabanzi okokubana singumasipala noko asihambisani nesenzo esisibonileyo esehlileyo izolo kwizakhiwo zethu kwaye futhi siyasikhalimela ngendlela esenzeke ngayo nangendlela esithe saqhubeka ngayo. Siyadibana sizinkokheli zebhunga likamasipala waseMathole ukuzama ukujonga indlela yokuqwalasela kabanzi okwenzekileyo. Sawuthi sabe sigqibile sikwazi ukukhupha ingxelo epheleleyo.
Mayor saying they don't agree with what happened, but they are busy with investigations to find out what actually happened. Now, both the mayor and the municipal manager have declined to come on the show, but there are groups of people who are planning to show up, but at the municipality's doors tomorrow to register their protest. Monwabisi Mahodi is one of the organizers, and he is going to join us a little later on to tell us what they are indeed up to. But of course, the video of Councillor Khulashe being dragged was indeed shocking. But so is the way that municipality is run. In 2020, the late Auditor General Kimi Makwetu flagged Amatole. The municipality was among the top 10 spenders, big spenders I should say, in the country, having splashed in the 2018-19 municipal year loads of money they didn't have on salaries and consultants. Last year, the situation reached crisis proportions after the municipality could no longer pay salaries at all. A proposal was made for the municipality to be put under administration, but apparently this was rejected by some of the district's politicians. A National Treasury turnaround plan is collecting dust somewhere in someone's office and still hasn't been signed off on. Listen to the municipality's mayor, Khanyile Maneli, telling my colleague Sakina Kamwendo on our sister program Morning Live last year what he deems to be the reasons the municipality is in such a mess.
Let's start with where the municipality finds itself. You have labor unions calling for the municipality to be placed under administration. What is your view on that? And also, how did the municipality get itself into this mess?
The current municipal manager conducted a diagnostic analysis, and a diagnostic report revealed that there are 7 key cost drivers namely, Sagina, the recategorization of the municipality from a category 6 to a category 7 as the salary scales set out by the bargaining council. This happened in 2014-2015 financial year. I will indicate when I talk about the salary bill increase, that jump of the salary bill. The second point that has caused the problem is the standardization of salaries, whereby there was a match-to-match of the salaries of the workers in the same position. The third issue that affected the financial position of the municipality was the introduction of the essential car user scheme, which are benefits, your cell phones, and the car allowance. The fourth issue, Sagina, is the non-payment of the Amatwala Water Board debt for services rendered.
Well, let's welcome now the Chairperson of Parliament's Watchdog Committee on Local Government, and that's Mr. Fikile Xasa. Mr. Xasa, good evening. Thank you very much for your time. Perhaps we should start with, those disturbing visuals South Africans have been, really disturbed by over the past 2 days. Just as the committee, where you stand on that.
Good evening, Vuyo and the listeners or viewers. As a committee for COGTA in the National Assembly, we were shocked as well by the video that was circulating, and out of the noise that was coming out from the communities, stakeholders and everybody else, we, as public representatives, we had to respond by immediately asking the executive, the minister, as well as the MEC for COGTA in the province, to urgently conduct an investigation into this matter. And we said that their earliest convenience would expect a report. We don't want to speculate about what is going on there, but we are a constitutional state. Laws that we pass are supposed to equalize. They are supposed to bring norms. They are supposed to also protect the rights of citizens. So we suspect that there are laws that might have been breached in that process, but we'll be waiting for the report from the minister as well as the MEC for COGTA in the province.
I spoke this afternoon to the MEC, who said they were, he's waiting for responses from the municipality about what happened before he can then decide what the next steps should be. But last night I also spoke to a speaker of a municipality, but also happens to be the chairperson of SALGA's committee dealing with empowerment of members, but also governance, was absolutely clear about the roles and responsibilities of people at a municipality, whether it's officials or councillors. And if for whatever reason, for example, a councillor, for argument's sake, does something that goes against the rules, it is the speaker who has the responsibility of dealing with that councillor in terms of the rules of councils. But even when that happens. If, for argument's sake, let's say someone has to be chucked out of the chambers, as we have seen before in Parliament, where the Speaker actually authorizes those men in white to take out of the chamber members of the House that she or she feels that needs to be taken out. That is done in terms of the rules, and the Speaker is the person who has to make that determination. In this instance, if that tape is anything to go by, an official actually issued an instruction, and what we saw there was disturbing, as you have said. Just from what I've just said, which was told to me by Mr. Stofile, and what you saw, there has to be things that you completely disagree with, that you too think should never have happened.
No, that is correct. That is why I'm saying we are a constitutional state, and we expect everybody, whether officials or public representatives, to be guided by the laws of the country. Our laws prescribe that we are equal. Our laws as well prescribe that there must be order, and when there are disputes, the laws actually help us to resolve such disputes. And then number last, our laws are supposed to protect our rights as citizens. So that is why I'm saying there is very clear breach of some of the laws in what was happening. We appreciate that the courts have been involved now, as well as the Commission for Gender Equality. And we expect even more the citizens as well. We cannot allow a situation where in our country there's chaos. When government talks about renewal, it is because we noted that there are things that people just do as they please. And I think that should come to an end. We should start at the level of local government as well, localize renewal at that level. And I think then the message from the president is going to sink. I did speak to the minister. We agree that whatever that actually happened there, it didn't warrant that a councillor can be dragged out of a municipal building in the way it was happening. And therefore, on that basis, we'd expect action. And when I say action, I'm saying action from the executive as well as the council. If we are going to actually reflect what the vision of government is all about, to say, let there be order, let's renew our government, because I think citizens are beginning to realize that we are not doing as we are expected to do. So in other words, that message must actually sink to all of us, whether public representatives or officials. We will not allow a situation where people do as they used to do. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Kasa, I mean, just going beyond this particular issue, one looks at, I mean, I was reading earlier some stuff, whether it's Auditor General reports, but I mean, something that was very interesting for me was that Amatola was also the subject of research by a couple of scholars, as well as a case study, that over the years it really has been having all sorts of problems. Now, you will have heard earlier the mayor speaking on Morning Live last year, sort of detailing what they regard to be the causes of some of the governance, financial, and other problems that we have seen in that municipality. The recategorization of that municipality apparently created or brought with it, some serious financial implications for the municipality, he told the SABC. The standardization of salaries meant that they needed to spend more. Cell phone, car, and other benefits also contributed. Payments to water boards. Is that your understanding also of the issues that have actually led to this municipality not really showing a particularly good, but a good track record in terms of financial management?
Now, let me indicate first that I've just been recently appointed as the new chairperson of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. Mm-hmm. So last year I was not really involved with the issues of Amatole and other municipalities. I'm still also trying to establish myself as well as the committee. We will definitely, as indicated, rely on the executive first. As they get into the situation, they will produce a report which we'll interact with. But as they produce the report, we expect them to as well do what they are supposed to do as the executive. In other words, we will be waiting for a report, but it doesn't stop them from doing what they are supposed to do. If there are any issues related to audit, we are soon going to engage municipalities with the audit outcomes. And as already indicated, I think we are taking matters of financial management seriously. And when I say we, that equally includes the municipality, the provincial COGTA, as well as the national department. So as a committee, we will definitely look into all those matters. Obviously, if you can find yourself unable to pay salaries because you have graded yourselves above what is prescribed, and I would imagine that the municipality by now should have relooked into the matter and see how they can save themselves. But like I'm saying, we will look into the matters of all municipalities for that matter. And I'm sure this month, February, we'll be looking at all the audit outcomes for municipalities. And I'm sure Matole would also feature there. Thank you very much.
Okay, we hope that you would indeed, Mr. Klasa, look into those issues, because just reading from what has been written about it over the past year, it makes for disturbing reading indeed. Last year they weren't able to pay salaries for the reasons that the mayor stated in that clip that we played, but also, moves to turn things around and really try to get the municipality on a more sound footing. Apparently, the such documents, one of which was drawn by National Treasury, is collecting dust somewhere and has been rejected by some of the powerful players in that district. But we'll see what Mr. Klasa and his committee and Parliament in general will do really with not only this municipality, but other municipalities that have fallen foul of rules that have really not, done well, certainly from where the Auditor General sits after auditing their books. To this now, there's a group of people who are planning to show up at the municipalities' doors tomorrow to register their protest over what we have all been fuming over, those visuals, disturbing visuals, where really the dignity of Councillor Khulashe was being dragged on the ground. Now, one of the people who are involved in tomorrow's protest, one of the organizers, is Monwabisi Mahodi, who joins us on the line from East London in the Eastern Cape. Monwabisi, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Apologies, we don't know what happened earlier when the line dropped. But tell us, what are you doing or planning to do tomorrow?
Good evening, Kuvuyo and the viewers. Tomorrow, we are planning to have a big march that is heading to the offices of Amatole District Municipality, following horrible videos that were circulating earlier this week, whereby a portfolio councillor was dragged out by so-called security guards out of her office. That incident sent a very, very bad and inhuman signal, not only to South Africa, but to the entire world. Now, following the President of South Africa's call, characterized society organizations, including the political parties and faith-based organizations. We are showing our commitment in ensuring that, indeed, gender-based violence is coming into an end.
Okay. And have you engaged the security forces? Because from what I've been reading on social media, there are people who are worried that the municipality is notorious for using big burly men to manhandle people. How are you going to avoid that? How are you going to ensure that the march is indeed peaceful and doesn't go awry?
But we are in a constitutional democracy, and we are aware that the workers of Amatole District Municipality are living under horrific situation. We have prepared ourselves enough, and the police of South Africa are our security. So we don't have any fear. All the political organizations are invited to be part of that, because this, as Councillor Khulashi, has been deployed by the African National Congress. But that is not only an particular organizational matter. That is a societal matter, and it is a matter which is in the attention of United Nations. Hence, we have no fear. We are going there, and we are calling for the hands to roll. We have seen other videos as well of the other incidents in the past, which showed that that is a norm in that. One will call this incident, as bad as it is, as a blessing in disguise to save the workers who are working there. Okay. We have received an information that workers of Amatole union members in particular, the leaders, are suspended. Over 60 workers of Amatole are in suspension as we speak, but they're just receiving money from home. Bear in mind that that institution is one of the institutions that have been recently on papers, on media all over, that is bankrupt. And the municipal manager is the one who's earning a huge amount, which is even above the premier of the province. So this calls a serious attention from our national government, okay, and from all the political parties that represent the society in Parliament.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you very much for your time, and once again, apologies for that line. One of the organizers of tomorrow's protest outside Amatole District Municipality, Monwabisi Mahodi, about their plans for tomorrow. And that's our show for this evening. Do join us again tomorrow night, 8 p.m. sharp.